Are you listening? Damn.
What's up, everybody? It's your host, Jesse Moeller, aka J Moeller05. Welcome into another episode of the Rantings of a Fantasy Football Fanatic. We are on the Get to Know series. We are on our second edition of that. And today, I had a special guest I wanted to bring in because they excel with the video medium and with where fantasy football is going and that platform right now. Like that's something we all should be shooting for because let's be real, like for myself, I don't have time just to constantly read articles. So the video mediums and audio, like you can just take it with you. It's personal and it's just easier. So like I love that platform. And they're someone I aspire to in the industry because if you check out their content, they've been killing it nonstop all off season and for a long time really in the industry. So without further ado, I wanted to bring on Mr. Justin Henry.
My man, appreciate you, dog.
I appreciate you too. How you doing today?
You know, I'm doing good, man. Doing good. It's the off season is almost over, so we are now in preseason. A lot of good things happening. A lot of football we get to watch. Practices are happening, so it's exciting times. Doing a lot of mock drafts here this off season, but the drafts are actually starting, and the season will be here before we know it. So I'm excited, bro.
Yeah, I'm happy that you came on and you get to talk with me for a little bit because I had a great time the other day on your Podathon show, which it got a little bit wild, but we had a good time, you could say.
24 hours of drafting and talking fantasy football and whatever in between. I didn't expect it. I didn't know what to expect heading into it, but it was a ton of fun, man. And a lot of unknown came from that. You know, you do something kind of wild. Like I would suggest anybody that's watching, like if you're ever thinking of an idea, you're like, do I want to do this or not? Just try it. And in worst case scenario, you try something new. And a lot of good relationships, experiences, a lot of things happened during that 24 hours that I wouldn't take back. So it was a fun time.
Yeah, and speaking of like trying new, I would say that's a great point to branch off. What was the kind of impetus for you to get started in this industry where you're like, you know what, I'm going to try something new and give it a shot and see where it takes me? So what was that spark, you could say?
Yeah, so I actually I own a marketing company, and so I have a marketing company. I started this in 2017, and so I was helping out small businesses. And one of my passions has always been sports. Like you can tell with all the stuff I got on, like this, I'm a sports fan. I've always been a sports guy since I was younger. Collected baseball cards, literally read sports almanacs for statistics. Like that's just something I always did. I played fantasy. I started playing fantasy when I was like 14, 15 years old in high school. Like I would sit in the computer in class and play fantasy sports and do my drafts there. So I've always had the love for sports, but through the marketing company, I was actually in a conversation with somebody talking about potential events that we could be doing. And one of them, I live in Sacramento. And I was like, well, how do we partner with the Kings, get them to do this event outside? And the guy was like, you know, you love sports so much. Why don't you just work in sports? Literally, that question changed the trajectory of my life because as somebody who was in marketing, I was like, shit, why not? So I reached out that same day to work with sports players. So I started up a sports marketing company within the next year, and then COVID hit. So COVID hit, everything shut down. And another meeting was like, well, what can I do during this meantime, right? So I started up a basketball podcast with my homie Will Thompson. We started up a basketball podcast. We got interviews with NBA players, G League players, overseas players. So that was really my first experience with sports. And then a little bit after that is when like TikTok started blowing up. YouTube Shorts started blowing up. But it was 2001, the summer of 2021. A couple buddies of mine were like, yo, what's up with this fantasy football stuff? Like, how can we make a little bit of extra money together as a group? Like, let's start a fantasy podcast. That was everybody's dream, right? Like, oh, let's start a fantasy podcast.
Yep.
And so we did that. And what happened was I realized very quickly that I was good at getting under people's skin in short form content. Our TikTok page went crazy. 10,000 followers in less than like a month. This is obviously back when like TikTok growth was a little bit more prevalent, but I knew I had a voice, and I knew that it was confirmed immediately when FanDuel reached out to me. And that's kind of what started my whole place in this fantasy space, the fantasy gods, FanDuel. That's how I got involved. So this is just 2021. And over that time, I worked with other companies, but that's really my start was like getting on TikTok, building a page called the Fantasy Gods, and then working with a company like FanDuel to get a little bit of like clout and respect. Yeah. That's really how it all started.
Yeah, because they give you that platform with a bigger name, right? Where you're like, oh, guess what? I'm connected with this ginormous company. Everybody's like, oh, respect. Like that's right. What I'm talking about. So for you with like the TikTok growth and everything like that, how did you decide to like stay with that path Like you obviously have a pretty good following on YouTube and things like that as well. But instead of say like there's certain analysts who will just be on Twitter or they'll be on Instagram or they will pick one platform, but it's like you're multiple platforms, you're hitting it from different angles. Do you have a process that you like? Was this part of your initial process, or did this kind of just form over time where you're like, you know what, these are the best paths we can hit and be the most successful?
So no, there was no direction initially early on. It was like, hey, let me just make these TikTok videos, right? We tried to do the podcast, like the Fantasy Gods. I'll have to differentiate between the two. The Fantasy Gods, we started like a podcast on YouTube. We don't get a whole lot of hits there. Then we made a Twitch page, and we're trying to stream all this stuff at once on like a StreamYard, right? We go and we stream everything at once. So the goal was really like just keep building the TikTok page as big as we can. That was the goal. And then what I noticed personally, and I was like, you know what? It's kind of layered. It's kind of layered. So bear with me. The Fantasy God stuff, we were on TikTok. That's where people knew us. But the more I started working with other companies, they were like, well, what about you? Like, this is the Fantasy Gods. This isn't Justin Henry. Well, why are we going to hire you? When in all reality, like a lot of the views and stuff that came from the page, it wasn't solely me, but I was a big reason why. And I think I know this, and the guys that I was cool with, they knew it. Like, I was a big reason why the page grew. So that's when I said, you know what, let me build my own page, right? So I started making TikToks for my own page. I had no YouTube channel. My YouTube channel was zero. So it's not like I just had all these followers and subscribers out of nowhere. I had to build from scratch. My personal page in the start of 2022, in 2022, I had like 600 followers on 60 followers on TikTok. And so over the course of that time, I started putting out 3 posts a day. I was like 3 posts a day, short form. Let me grow on TikTok. I started growing on there. And then what happened was they said, hey, in February of 2023, YouTube said this, in February 2023, we're going to start paying creators. I was like, you know what? That needs to be a lane that I choose. Once I got live on TikTok, I was like, how can I build both TikTok and YouTube at the same time? And I was noticing, like, if I went on YouTube, there would be people from TikTok. I'd be like, hey, come to the YouTube. This is where you, but I was like, what happens if I stream on both? So what I decided to do was I was like, let me take the TikTok audience that I built, right? People stay on one platform. I was like, let me take that and try to transfer it over to YouTube. So being live on both, being able to cross over and say, hey, redirect them to another piece of content. It's a lot of work, but it's worth it because you have an audience already that knows and loves your product. How do you get them onto another platform? That was my biggest hurdle. And so that's why you mentioned the YouTube growth. A lot of that is due to TikTok or being just live video. But it's fun, man. Doing both short form and long form, man. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of work, but it's rewarding when you can kind of like start to build into both areas.
Yeah, I think it is really rewarding when you notice it. If you keep putting in that consistent effort and that work, right, and you see the growth like span from that, it's really rewarding as a creator because that's the goal of what you're trying to do, right? You're trying to grow your point to be able to, ideally for a lot of people in this industry, to sell whatever product you want to rep, right? Like you said what we call like try hard merch I saw on your website. And if people will see your TikToks, they know exactly what that represents, right? So how did you integrate basically? I mean, it feels like it's pretty straightforward, but like how were you able to integrate your try hard videos and then you're like, you know what, let's make a product out of this and see if we can sell some merchandise off of it, right?
So that's actually a brand new product. It's a brand new shirt that I made. And for 2 years in this industry, I said, you know what? I don't want my audience to be my customer pay me wise, right? I don't like taking money. For whatever reason, I have this thing about like taking money from the people who consume my content. I'd rather work with the brands. But over this last couple months, I realized like there's a need for it. People want more from you. And, you know, your time, you got to respect your time a little bit. Maybe you don't need to be money hungry and chase every single dollar from your consumer and charge them for every single thing. But if you provide value, it's okay to say, hey, look, I got other stuff. It's just going to cost you. Right. So I try to dial it back as far as like charging for my draft guide. I had 1,200 downloads on my draft guide, and there was an optional thing to like, if you want to purchase it, go ahead, put your price tag in. I had 1,200 downloads on it. Guess how much I made from it? Just take a guess.
Probably like so it was listed as free, right? But people could.
It was listed as free, and there was a thing that said like optional. How much you think I made from it?
Maybe like $100 something.
I made $80 from it.
Oh yeah, see that's the thing.
Off 1,200 sales, and so or 1,200 downloads, I should say. And
Yeah, that's
like there's a missed opportunity cost there. But then it's like for me, I want more people to see my stuff and tap in with me and build the brand. I think that there's more long term with building a brand than there is with chasing dollars initially. So you have to figure out your goal and your purpose. You talked about being on TikTok and live streaming at the same time on YouTube or building both platforms. It's a long game, man. And it would have been easy to get frustrated with my TikTok growth early on. It would have been easy to get frustrated seeing my thing at 400 subscribers, but I just kept pushing and providing value. To me, I think that that's the way to build your audience initially, is to be consistent, provide an immense amount of value, more so give out a lot of free information, free stuff. But then at the same time, once you build your audience, you got to give them a reason to stick around and stay. So I think that's the biggest component for me, is looking, how can I provide the most value long term? And there's sticking power to that. That's essentially how I've been building my brand, is focusing all on the long term, my man.
I think that's probably the hardest thing for a lot of people in this industry, is building that brand the correct way that you're comfortable with, right? Because it's always that really weird point where it's like, man, I feel weird like charging people for these things, right? Because a lot of us have this imposter syndrome where you don't feel like you belong. So you're like, really, you want to pay for this? And they're like, yeah, like we respect what you do. And you're like, I don't know. So if you're able to get past that and you build the brand correctly, like you have that base with you. And I feel like what you're doing makes a lot of sense. And then you take to the next step and the next step, and you're like, yeah, like people are like, hell yeah, I would have to give you money for this stuff. And you're like, it's like respect for you as a creator, which is, you love to see stuff like that.
Well, and it's also a thing, like, I think people, but I also think that people like tend to look at things differently, right? Like, especially in our space, in this fantasy football space, you're looking at, oh, this guy has a full-time opportunity, or, oh, this guy charges $20 for his draft guide. Everybody's looking at everybody else as a measuring stick and not focusing on their audience, not focusing on the people that are actually consuming their content. You know, I go over to Twitter and I have 1,700 followers on Twitter. I just talked about how I had 1,200 downloads from my draft guide, and I have 1,700 followers on Twitter. And I can make a big case of like, oh, why don't I have as many Twitter followers as this person? Or why don't I get as many likes on a post as this person? That's easy to do. But then I also know, like, the people that are tapped in with me depend on me. The 1,700 that decided to click follow on my name depend on me. So I could go look over my shoulder and be like, oh, this person has 20K followers and they don't do nothing but post memes. Or I could talk in my head about all the different things that other people do, but I got to focus on me and the people that consume my content. There was somebody in that live video we did, right? 24-hour mock draftathon I had on my page. Shout out to you for being on there for like 5-6 hours of that thing, man. Stronging it out with me, dog.
I was like, I feel bad, man. You're gonna be up all night by yourself. Like, I'll hop on. I got time. Let's try to make this a little bit easier for you.
Yo, shout out to you, man. That was dope, and that was the first time we had interacted, man. So much love to that, for real. But there's a lot of people who question, like, why you would stay on a mock draft stream when you got 30 people watching on YouTube. You got at sometimes the TikTok live was at 9 people watching. Like, sometimes it was like 200, but like sometimes it was 8 people, 9 people watching. Why would you stay on live? You didn't make no money off the mock draftathon. You were giving stuff away. Why would you do that? And to me, there's so much value in building audience. The guys that were a part of that will always remember that. They'll always remember it. And I have people that were there watching now. Some of the names you probably remember: 50 Shades of Trey and Cade and these guys. It's like they are now committed to being part of my culture, my group, and my culture. So, and my brand. And I find a ton of value in that. You know, you get an army of people behind you that support what you do and believe in you, man. I don't think there's anything that can replace that. So money comes and goes. The difference is, if you can provide value and impact, I think that goes way further. So for me, that's the value I find in this space. And I think a lot of people are looking for, like, how do I make a quick buck? How do I get full time? That shit can come and go real quick. Quick.
That stuff over time, like, it wears people out if you're just chasing that money and that's your main goal, instead of, like, for a lot like myself, why I got this industry is because I love fantasy football. Like, that's why I hopped in this industry, right? And I thought I could do something different. Like, I was like, you know what? Maybe I could do something different than, what everyone's doing, or be, a different voice. So I was like, let's hop in, see what happens. If it works, cool. If it doesn't, but I'm not just going to chase that dollar, burn myself out, and then just walk away, because you see that happen far too often. But I think building the community, like you're talking about, that's the best way to go about it, because then you have those followers for however long you want to do this for, right?
And the thing is, I can't hate anybody that builds it their way. Like if you do
No.
build it for the dollar, like shout out to you, bro. Like that's go get what you know how to do. Something I think that is undervalued is consistency. Like just be
Yes.
you. And if it feels more comfortable to be in this industry and this is how you support your family and how you build, wealth for yourself, that's fine. Like I'm not here to hate on anybody else's journey. This is just the way that, me personally, and I'm not like a huge creator. I don't have like this insane amount of followers on any platform. I'm just me. And it's like, at the end of the day, I think my videos have come across enough people to where I got people that love me. I got people that hate me. Yeah. But at the end of the day, I built it my way. You know what I'm saying? And so I'm going to be here for a while.
And that's value to yourself. Like hearing you talk about that, you're happy with that. So that comes through. And like the one thing I noticed, you're unabashedly yourself, which means you're honest and you're who you are. And as someone in this space, like I 100% respect that. And I imagine your audience does, because I was with you for a few hours with the audience. So they were riding with you throughout. Yeah. I was like, yeah, they are tapped in with him. They love what he's doing. So yeah, absolutely. Like I always, if someone will come into my DMs or talk, like ask me a question about this, I'm like, just be yourself. Because like if you're not going to be yourself, at some point, you're going to wear yourself out because you're trying to be something you're not. And if you can't be that, then it's just you're building it on false ground. It's going to crumble. So yeah. I love seeing fantasy analysts to be that way and go through that.
It's tough because you get into this mold now of like, in order to get jobs in this industry, there's certain metrics and things that these companies look at, right? Like what do you provide article wise, video wise, but there's a lot of intangibles that they don't look for. So what happens is they don't look at all the intangibles. They look at, do these guys hit the check marks? And I think in this industry, unfortunately, there's a lot of check marks that are easily attainable. Anybody can do that.
Yes.
I hate to say this the wrong way, but like, me, I'm going to just feel this on my mind. When we talk about like, especially when you start going to like advanced analytics and things like that, it's easy to go look up numbers. And I'm not trying to, it's going to sound like hate, maybe. And maybe if you perceive it as hate, that's fine. My goal isn't for this to be a hate towards anybody that's analytics based, but as the path to entry is a little bit less. The barrier to entry in this space is a little bit less, because if you can identify 3 or 4 solid numbers, you can make a take, right? Which is, it's fine because a lot of my takes are based off of what I watch and it's all opinion based as well. But there's the path. The reason why I see this thing going the wrong way is because there's certain numbers that everybody can look up and say, all right, well, if this person's this, and this is a breakout. If they don't do this, and this is a bust. But we all have that same information. There's no intuition on that. So at the end of the day, what's happening to a lot of this fantasy industry is that they're becoming bots. They don't realize it. We all got to look at ADOT for the next breakout player, average depth of target, who got the air yards, who's doing yards per route run. It's all the same information. And so if we're all, as analysts, that's what these companies want, and that's all we're producing to find the advantage or to find the cheat code, at the end of the day, we're providing bot analysts. Like everybody loves Calvin Ridley. Everybody loves Deontay Johnson. Everybody loves DJ Moore. I talked about this on the stream. I was like, bro, I can tell you're on Twitter. I can tell when you do a mock draft, I can tell if you've been on Twitter, because a lot of times it's the same players that everybody likes. And so I think where I'm struggling right now in the industry to kind of, I not struggling, the place that I think the industry is struggling, and I hope to kind of change the narrative, is having that authenticity. I might be wrong on some takes. That's part of fantasy. We don't have, there's no cheat code to fantasy. You can't go off of those numbers and expect to win championships a lot. It doesn't happen. There's too much randomness in fantasy football. There's too much luck involved in fantasy football. And yeah, can you get to the playoffs? Cool. But what's the goal? Your entire goal of fantasy football is to win your championship. Absolutely. And that takes intangibles. That takes luck, and it takes a little bit of that intuition. And so that's the part I think is being lost in fantasy football right now. And unfortunately, as a creator, I think it's tough for some people to say, you know what, let me be me. Let me be wrong. Let me go to the numbers. Let me completely hinge on the numbers, so that way I can keep my job. That way I can be a writer in the space. That way I can sound like I know what I'm talking about. That I feel like that is a kind of a detriment right now to the industry, unfortunately. I didn't mean to get long-winded on that, but
no, you're good.
I can sense it coming.
I I actually think that gives an opening in the space if everyone's going that direction, like you're saying, right? That allows people who are unique, like yourself, like you get to pop up because you're different, right?
Yeah.
So but like it creates a pathway of easier resistance for people to go a different path where you're like, so maybe you want to use those numbers, maybe you want to mix them up a little bit. And the thing that's lost, like we talked about this a little bit on live stream, was context. Like each offense and each like team has context that changes situations. Like, so yeah, I 100% get that. Cause like if you're strictly on Twitter or you're strictly on TikTok or you're strictly on one platform, or like this applies to like different ADP websites like ESPN, you know, and all those, right? Like you'll notice it kind of hyper focuses people on how they do that. But once they branch out, you're like, oh, there's a whole different world out here, right? Which is when I noticed that when I first jumped on TikTok, I was like, whoa, this is different. And then I went on to Instagram and I was like,
for good and bad reasons, right?
Right. Yeah. They like every platform has its like pros and cons, as you would say. So there's things we all as analysts and people, you know, who consume our content should be able to like notice that and maybe shift and see how it works for them. Because I feel like if you want to be in this industry, there's a path for everyone to be in this industry. It's big enough to support everybody. So if you wanted to go, like we're talking about, be the bot where you just want to focus on numbers, hey, do you? That's but like I more put people in thresholds. Like I'll put a giant group of people in thresholds where I try not to be biased with players, but let's be real, like I have some biases with players. As much as I want to be like, oh, I'm unbiased, like no, I'm biased with players. Like you saw, I'm like, yeah, no, I hate that guy. I love that guy, right? You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of it's nice to get an outside perspective on what you're doing when you talk to somebody else and you get a different perspective. And I think that's one thing you in particular bring is like you will completely change your perspective on something I'm thinking about. And then after I'm talking, I'll think about it for a while. I'll be like, you know what? It makes sense to me. And in case in point, this was when I saw your Ezekiel Elliott video. People are like, oh, he's dust, he's dirt. And you're like, he's RB35. And I was like, you know what? That makes a lot more sense. Just off the top of my head when I was looking to it, I was like, yeah, like that makes a lot more sense. Like he's going to have a role, right? So if I was just on Twitter, I might not have seen that. But the fact I was on TikTok, you know? So it kind of changes your perspectives. And I think that's a benefit to everybody. So not just, you know,
I think in too, it's this herd syndrome, right? Not syndrome, herd mentality, right? You're like, well, if all these smart people are talking about these guys, then that has to be the way that it is, right? Or like, it's easier to go with the grain a lot of times in fantasy because there is so much randomness to the sport, right? So it's easier to be like, well, if ADP is here, then I got to have him at least within one or two spots. Maybe I'll drop him down a spot or two. Like the thing people most hate on my takes this year is like Chris Olave. Yeah. I would say the Chris Olave take is the one that probably causes the most rift within even my own audience, the people that love me, right? This is the one that I get a lot of backlash on. And right now he's currently going as the wide receiver 12. I have him as like wide receiver 25, wide receiver 26 range. And a lot of people can't understand why I do that. And I don't think it's because of the talent or the numbers that he put up last year. What I truly believe is it's the ADP. Because if he was at wide receiver 21 in ADP, if that's how the rankings came out, and I had him at wide receiver 25, I wouldn't be hearing a whole lot of backlash from it.
No.
It really is like that. Like I talk about the herd mentality in fantasy. It's like, oh no, this is the player everybody's talking about. This is the sleeper. There's a reason why Bijan Robinson is now a top 3 back. There's a reason why Calvin Ridley has gone from mid-tier wide receiver 3 early in the offseason to now a high-end wide receiver 2 by the end of the offseason. It's the herd mentality. And now everybody's pushing the same direction. What I try to provide is, especially on those bigger name topics, if I have a contrarian point of view, I don't on every player, but if I have one, I'm going to put it out there. So you're right, man. It's tough. The bot mentality, right? And I know it's a bad word to use, but like it kind of starts to be like where everybody's a little bit robotic.
Yeah, there's certain analysts who I think people like respect across the board. So if someone such as like JJ Zacharyson, like a huge name in the space, he says it, a lot of people take that as gospel and they're like, you know what, I'm riding with, and that's so. And it's interesting because like we as analysts, like we provide, you know, information for people to consume, and they trust our rankings and things like that. So you have to be able to provide your own rankings, like support them and back them up. And so if you're just listening to someone else and you're like, you know what, that's exactly where it is, like I'm not going to change it, like you're not really giving a service to people. So you have to, you know, put your own effort to that. And I think there is a lot of that where it's kind of just this giant circle of all people with similar takes and all that. So it's nice to get outside of that and, you know, do your own thing. I wanted to kind of ask you about how you manage this with a family as well, because that's the hardest part for myself, because having the family and fantasy, a lot of times they compete with each other just because get home from work. All right, now I got to do this article. I got to do this video, blah, blah, blah. Got to make dinner. So how do you go about doing both things? Like, how are you able to not stretch yourself too thin and wear yourself out?
I go at my own pace, and I think there's an expectation for creators, which is unmanageable right now, and they're not paid for it the right way.
Mm-hmm.
This is something, if you clip this up at all, this is something you need to clip up. There's an expectation for creators right now, not just to be creators, but to be SEO copywriters. You need to be able to write copy. You need to be able to write an article. You need to be market research. You need to understand and be data analysts. You also need to be good at video. You need to be able to be a talent on video, be able to convey your message. And so well-spoken, you have to be able to edit your own videos now. You need to be able to be a video editor. Your audio needs to sound perfect. Your lighting needs to be perfect. And so why is this the only career, fantasy creator, in creators in general? Why is this the career where you have to be an expert at everything? In order to be respected, you have to be an expert at everything. If you write an article, you spend hours on that article. You have to find stats. You have to understand the sport. You have to know where to find information. You have to be able to craft an article. You have to be a journalist to write an article, and it pays $25. It pays $40. It pays $50 for an article. That article is going to take you 3 to 4 hours. And the fact that you have to watch the game, you already have to know information. Waiver wire pickups, you have to have intuition on these waiver wire pickups. Go through and search a lot of other stuff. You spend 4 or 5 hours on an article, or you give out a shitty product. Those are your two options. You go and you give a half-ass article out, and then you're not respected in the space. The companies, they want videos. They want you to be live video for $50 an hour, $100 an hour, somewhere in that range. When you're a talent, you have to come up with this stuff on the fly. Remember numbers, answer questions, go into the live video setting, make sure your audio, your mic is set up, your situation is perfect, your video is crystal clear. Like, this is a high expectation. If you're a content creator, they want to pay you $50 a video, $75 a video. This is a lot of work. And I think this industry, there's a lot of money being made in this industry from companies, and it sucks for these creators, man, because you talk about managing the time with the family. You talk about managing extracurricular. Like, this isn't an 8-hour job. No. There's no 8-hour job with fantasy. You're almost always on, because you have to be the newest news that comes out. You need to be able to react to it, make a video, make an article on it, be ready to talk about it on Twitter. The newest, an injury happens, you have to be on it, be able to provide analysis on it. So you have to go look up statistics. How does this affect the third best player on that team? Because information is so readily available, as an independent content creator, you're now challenging organizations to keep up with speed. You're now challenging a lot of other things, and organizations are like, hey, we need this information now. Saturday, Sunday, Monday night, Thursday night, Wednesday before, when you got to do pickups, you have to be available. And for me personally, I think being on the other side of it, where I'm not attached to a company, has helped out a lot. If I want to do a video, I can do a video. If I want to do a live, I can do a live. If I want to put out 2 posts this week, I can do that. If I want to put out 3 in a day, I can do that. I worry about myself. And it's so much like keeping up with everybody else. ESPN puts out 9 posts, 9 videos in a day, and then they put out 2 live streams in a day. And content is so widespread. People are using AI to make it's a lot to manage, man. It's a lot. So I think as a creator, the one thing you can control is your mentality. What keeps you right up here? What workload is that? And for me, there's times where I'm like, you know what? Let me put this shit away. Let me go with my family. There's times where it overconsumes me. I'm always on my phone, or I'm always on my computer. So I have to find balance. It's tough because I got 3 kids and a wife who love me, and I love them dearly, and I want to spend time with them, but I make time for the things that matter. And nothing comes before my family. Nothing comes before that side of it. You know what I mean? So it's how I balance it, man. It's what feels comfortable to me. And if I notice myself getting away from what I'm true to, that 75 video ain't worth it. That little opportunity ain't worth it. I'll move away from that very quickly. So I'm a little crazy. I'm a little crazy in the head, dog.
Yeah, I think we all are, who are in this space, because like you're saying, it's almost impossible to keep up with all the expectations. Like, it's just, you can't be 24/7 as much as we're on our phone or doing all the work. And then on top of it, if you're actually playing, like if you're playing in leagues and doing that too on top of it, It's
Yes.
just, it's all like, I will tell anybody who's trying to get in the space, it's going to be a lot. So be prepared if you're going to work for a company. Like if you're able to just like, you're doing your own thing, then absolutely work at your own pace. But if you're going to go work for a company, there's going to be certain expectations and they're going to be like, yeah, we need you to do this, do that, do that. Where realistically, you're kind of doing your own thing as it is. So if you're able to go do your own company and that's the format you want to go do that, be your own boss. Because I will say, I've been a boss before. There's nothing better than being your own boss. It is the best, right?
It is, and it comes with a lot of expectations and a lot of responsibility. But there's no better feeling than being able to control your own destiny, in my opinion. So
Yes,
I'm with you there, man. It's tough because I see benefits to both sides, right? And
Mhm.
I think that's the juggle. Is you see the income stability on one side, you see a little bit of inconsistency and the what ifs on the other side, but the freedom. So it really just depends on what you value the most and what's most important to you and your family, man. At the end of the day, you have to do what works best for you in your situation. I can only speak on my personal experiences and how I view things. At the end of the day, $75 might work for somebody on a video. That might be way more than they were getting paid. So, or $50 an article might be like, oh shit, this is great. Like I can only speak on what I feel and my experiences. You know what I mean? So,
right, because that's what you know and like what we know. So yeah, it's each for everybody. Like you have to decide what works for you and what doesn't work for you, and be happy with it. Because if you're not happy with it, it's gonna just wear you out. Like there's no other way around it. You're doing something you just can't keep up with.
Yo, and I'm on P2W Network. You know, one of the people that hustles, my boy Nick Script, bro. That dude hustles.
Nonstop.
You want to talk about somebody that invests time in a craft, man? Like, I love people like that in the industry where like, and I hope that's how people view me. Like, they busting their tail. And Nick is one of them dudes, man. Like, he is a solid dude, bro. So I respect people like that, man, that are out there just, they have a life on the other side of it, but you just can't tell. It looks like somebody working for him. It looks like two, 3 people are working for him.
Exactly, right? Yeah. Like when I talked to him about the job, I was like, yo, what I'm trying to observe you from like close, like see how you do this nonstop 24/7. He's like, yeah, man. He's like, it's a grind. I was like, I believe you 100%. Yeah. You don't gotta convince me, man. I get it. It's respect. It's been nice like being over there, like just talking to him, getting a little earful. So yeah, it's great for everybody.
Yes, sir.
What's your kind of your end game being in this space? Like 5 years from now, where do you look to be? Do you still plan on being in the space 5 years from now? Like, or kind of what's your end goal, I guess would be the best way to phrase it.
I don't really have an end goal. I'm gonna be honest with you. Like, I do plan on being in space in 5 years, but it wouldn't surprise me if I pivoted at some point. I kind of keep that mentality of like, how do I stay sane here? Am I doing something that I want to do? Am I having fun doing it? And I bounce around. Unfortunately, that's just a nature of who I am. Like I bounce around. Like I said, I had a marketing company, sports marketing company, basketball podcast, fantasy football. I kind of bounce around, unfortunately, but I do what makes me happy at the end of the day. And if this shit's making me happy, like I'll continue to be here. That's my goal. But my end goal, if I had to say anything, would be to kind of change the narrative as to what a sports creator looks like. Somebody in this space can look like. I think for so many years it was like, oh, it's the guy in the suit. It's the Stuart Scotts. It's the Adam Schefters of the world. And you have to be in a suit and a tie in order, to be respected. If you're talking about the draft, you better look like Mike Mayock and you better look like Mel Kiper. And it's like, I think that there was a person that went to the sports book back in the day that took their little briefcase of money and took that into the sports book and said, I would like to wager $5,000 on the New England Patriots in this game today. That ain't the same sports bettor that's out there. It's the guys that look like me and you. It's the kids that just turned 18 now. They got it on their smartphone. And so I want people to be able, like, if there's somebody that looks like me in this space, there's somebody that operates in the same way as me, maybe a little random, maybe a little casual for some people, talks how they want to talk. I want that person to have a lane too, to be able to create space and be valued. I want that person to be valued, not because of if they check all the boxes, but because of what they provide at scale. That's what I want. I want somebody who's genuine and authentic. I want to pave the way for the next generation of talented people out there to be themselves and be valued for it. That would be my goal in this space.
That's a great answer. I haven't really heard an answer like that, but that's one of the better answers I've imagined. When I ask people this question, like that's the one that I
appreciate it. And honestly, another to add to that, not trying to like, this is just another goal of mine is people in this space in fantasy football. A lot of times we assume that everybody that consumes our content is equal to us, right? Equal mentality that they know as much as we do. My goal is just to make smarter fantasy players, because I think a lot of times there's rookie people in their first year that consume my content, or maybe somebody that's been losing and just didn't understand. Maybe somebody that doesn't care as much about football as you and I do, you know? And so my goal is to make, if you watch my content and you consume it, you're a better mock drafter. You handle situations better. If an injury goes down, now you know how to handle that. And you know that the goal is to win the championship. You're one track minded to how to do that. In-season adjustments, how to rate players, or how to look at different things from a different perspective. And shit, even if you disagree with me, how to consume information, or at least have balance. Like, my goal is just to create smarter fantasy players so that they can win more leagues. Like, if you follow me, that's literally my goal. I talk about it all the time. I don't care about being right. I just want to help you win your league. So that would be another goal of mine. If I was to say in game, if I walked away from this space and I'm like, you know what, 90% of the people that consume my content became smarter in some aspect, that's the win for me.
Yeah, when I talk to people in the industry, I'm like, if I help one person a year, like I actually help them get better, like I'll consider that a win. Even if it wasn't super successful for a year for me or whatever that is, like if I did that, like I at least help one person, so I know I can feel good about it. So yeah, I love that. Like that's what we're here for, right? To make people better at this game that we all play. Because let's be real, not everybody's on that grind where they got 30 leagues and they're doing all these mocks, and you know what I'm saying? There's people that are in like 1 or 2 home leagues, and it's a whole different ballgame for them. So yes, it's I think generalizing your content for everybody to be able to consume is a great way to go about it. We get too hyper focused sometimes, and it's like I'll listen to some content, I'm like, I can't take away anything from that, and like I feel like I know a lot. So if someone who doesn't know a lot about like the stats or the data, they're gonna be like, that was just like right over their head. So yeah, I think sometimes we get too into it.
And I feel like there's a lot of, I hate to say it, but I'm going to. There's a lot of gimmicky content out there. It's like, oh, look at this, and this, so that way it runs up the views, right? Like, wait for the player at the end, or here's the thread. And I'm not sure that really benefits the community, right? Like when you're, maybe it does. Maybe I just don't. I'm not the particular consumer for that, but I feel like it kind of. There's not a lot of like, hey, how do I just get better? It's like, here's your way to win. Take these players. But there's not like why, or like, okay, what happens when it doesn't work? You know what I'm saying? Like there's not a lot of fallback plans. So that's the thing. And maybe in my content, I could even be better at that. But I kind of feel like that's a thing, is like people are so gimmicky now, and it's not because they want to be, it's because they have to be in order for their content to be seen, which kind of sucks.
Yeah, it does. I think it's kind of the old analogy, like instead of giving a man a fish, you teach them how to fish, right? Where you kind of help them get better instead of just like, here you go, here's the answer. It's like, well, no, here's the reasoning behind it. So they actually understand it a little bit better.
You always get that one person who's like, hey, yo, can you just draft my team for me?
Like, draft my team. You're like, you won't pay me? I'll draft my team for you. Okay. Yep. Like, but yeah, man, I very much appreciate you coming on. It was a goal of mine to get you on. So yeah, I'm glad you made some time for it. Where could you just go ahead and give the spiel of where people can find you at?
Yeah, you can find me Justin Henry with the 3 instead of an E on all social media platforms. If you're on YouTube and you just want to watch the daily show, it's called Justin Henry Show. You can just tap in there. I do a daily show Monday through Friday, and then during the season it'll be Sunday mornings as well, helping you guys with start-sit decisions. There's also other content on there that you can consume, talking breakout sleepers. I do mock drafts, fades, a lot of fades, especially people that others that people like. But like I said, my goal is to help y'all become smarter, win your leagues. That's where y'all can find me, man.
Awesome, appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming on. And yeah, this is the Rantings of Fantasy Football Fanatic. Thank you everybody for being in. And yeah, we'll see you next week.
Have you ever felt? Are you listening? Damn.